Roast beef. It's a fantastic way to make a really, really nice dinner. Serves a lot of people. You can slice it up and make really, really good sandwiches with the leftovers.
I'd like to be alone with the sandwich for a moment.
In today's recipe, I'm going to show you a couple of tricks that will get you the perfect roast beef every single time. What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Matt, and it's Sunday supper. Every single Sunday, I give you one of my 50 life-changing recipes for home cooks, and today we are doing one of my absolute favorites, a roast beef with a red wine shallot jus. It takes a little bit of time in the oven, but not a lot of work, and the payoff is fantastic. So let's jump in the kitchen and let's start preparing this. Here I have a piece of sirloin. It's about 800 grams or so, 2 pounds. Doesn't really matter how large it is. What does matter is that it's a similar size shape so that it cooks evenly. I'm gonna tie this up. I'm going to use a butcher's knot to make sure that it stays really tight. When we cut, we want to cut across the grain. So we want to tie with the grain going as much of this way as possible. Then I've got some butcher's twine underneath the roast, the cut end going over top, then put the two ends over my left hand, pinch the two sides together, take the cut end, loop over your thumb, and go underneath and around the two pieces that we had before. Take your thumb out and then put the cut end through the loop that we made, and then tighten. You want to go tight, but not too tight so that it doesn't rip. And the last thing that I like to do, form a last loop, go around, and tighten this one more time. And we've got a butcher's knot. I'm going to do the rest of it. This is all tied up, and it's gonna make a massive difference in our roast. For a couple of reasons, it's gonna cook evenly because we're gonna put this in the oven. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. And it's gonna keep its shape, so it's gonna look a lot nicer at the end of the day. How are we gonna cook this? Well, we're going to reverse sear it. That may sound pretty complicated, but in practice, it's relatively easy, and it's going to get you that perfect edge-to-edge doneness that we prize so much in roast beef. Traditionally, with cooking a roast like this, you want to sear it first. Put it over really high heat, get a nice brown crust, and then throw it in the oven. We're going to do the reverse of that, where we're going to cook it in the oven at a really, really low temperature. That's going to give us that edge-to-edge doneness, and then afterwards, we're going to sear it. Only thing to watch out for when you're doing this is that we have to cook it a fair bit less than we would if we were searing this the traditional way. So we're going 10 to 15 degrees less of medium rare. 130 Fahrenheit is what we're shooting for in about a 225 Fahrenheit oven. So the only thing we have to do now is put this on a wire rack. You want it to be elevated just slightly, seasoned with a bit of salt and freshly cracked pepper. I think it's gonna take about 90 minutes, but I'm gonna start checking after about 60 with an instant reach thermometer. So the beef is in the oven. In the meantime, I can create my sauce. I think onions and roast beef go really, really well together. I think red wine and beef go really, really well together. So we're gonna combine those two ideas, and we're gonna make a shallot red wine reduction. We're gonna reduce some red wine, we're gonna reduce some stock until it's about 2 cups or so. It'll take about 15 or 20 minutes at a medium simmer like this. The other thing we can do is prep our shallots. This is kind of boring to do, so I'll do them all really, really quickly. If you don't have shallots, you can use onions in place of shallots. The shallots just give you a slightly different flavor, which I prefer. Onions are perfectly fine. You can experiment with this. Just slice them quickly like this. You don't want them to be too small because they'll just burn, but you also don't want them to be too big. This size seems to work pretty well. That's all done. Let's check on our beef. So this took about an hour, a little bit less than I thought, but let's temp it and see how we're doing. Let's go in here. So we're at about 121, zoom in a bit. Wanted a little bit closer than that 10 to 15 degrees that we wanted. It's been out of the oven for a few minutes, and that's why this has gone up a bit, because of the residual heat is going to continue to cook this. So it's not the end of the world, but it might be cooked just a little bit more than I wanted. What we have to do now is sear this. So what I'm gonna do is get a really, really hot pan, add some neutral flavored oil, and then I'm going to brown all sides of this as quickly as I can. It should take no more than 5 minutes in total, and you want something that looks a little bit like this at the end of the day. So I've got my beef set aside. Always rest your roast. You need those juices to reabsorb. If I was to cut into it right now, a lot of the delicious flavor would just spill out onto the cutting board. So I'm gonna give this about 5 or 10 minutes here to rest, which is a perfect amount of time for me to finish off my sauce. In the exact same pan that I was using, I wanna add all those shallots that I cut up and saute them until they're soft. This took about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I'm just gonna deglaze with a bit of red wine and then add it to that reduced stock and wine mixture that I made earlier. Look how good this looks. The crust is fantastic. It's kept its shape. It's a really nice cylindrical shape all the way throughout. The big question is, did I overcook this? Is it still that medium rare that I really, really wanted? There's only one way to find out. The last thing I need to do is cut off this twine and then cut this down into the size of slices that I want. So we've got our roast beef and our shallot red wine jus. Let's give it a try. It's really good, really, really beefy. The red wine and shallots really just amp up the flavor of this. Fantastic meal, easy roast beef. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'll see you next time. So good.